Hey everybody, welcome into the MLSsoccer.com studios here in New York City. Russ Thaler with Calen Carr and Andrew Wiebe, and it is just about time for the 2016 MLS Expansion Draft. 2 new teams entering the league in 2017, and a lot of activity taking place right now in Atlanta, Georgia for Atlanta United, and just outside Minneapolis, Minnesota for Minnesota United. And Calen, a lot of players around this league have seen their names on the unprotected list. What's going through their minds right now?
I think a lot of them will actually be excited because if you've left unprotected, there's 2 new exciting teams coming into the league that may see your value, may see a space for you, and there's a lot of excitement around these 2 teams. I think they look to be running things the right way, and these guys will be looking for a fresh start. All
right, well, the draft is going to start momentarily. Here are the rules. They're 5 rounds, Andrew Wiebe.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a departure from years past. You remember Orlando and NYCFC both had 10 picks, but the league concluded along with an input from the teams that, hey, 5 is better. You get allocation money on the other side. The big thing to remember, though, here is if a player gets picked, say from Toronto FC are safe from there on out. Their players will come off the board. That's important for those teams. They don't want to get rated for all these players. The other thing, watch out for trades. I don't think all 10 players will end up on the expansion teams. I'm sure the phones in those offices ringing off the hook.
You better believe members of both teams looked at the list of players available and said, we could use that very nicely.
Yeah, we can.
But before we get to the players available, how about the teams? Atlanta United is already making a splash.
Yeah, they're going for DPs, and they're going down to Argentina to do it. Miguel Almiron, apparently an Arsenal target. They beat him to it, paid a lot of money reportedly for this guy. Left-sided player, young DP, Paraguayan, and then Hector Villalba, an Argentine as well. He's been down in Mexico on loan. But 2 big signings, 2 guys they expect to create for a big forward up top.
Yeah, right at the top of the attack, Kenwyn Jones. Of course, everyone knows him from his Premiership experience. Trinidad and Tobago international as well. He fits more into the mold of a Josie Altidore type figure in this team that will be able to score on the ground, but of course be a presence in the air. I think a lot of MLS defenders will be afraid of this guy.
Not a member of the team, but reported interest in Brad Guzan, the goalkeeper for the U.S. men's national team. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, and it's for Middlesbrough. Now, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of writing on the wall right now. We asked the decision makers, the guy in that Atlanta war room right now, about Guzan yesterday. They said, hey, we do not comment on players under contract. That's all well and good. They also said we have the number 1 spot in the allocation order, which is the mechanism Guzan would use to come in. So it's not done, but it looks like it will get done, and that'd be a big signing for this expansion side.
All right, for more on what's going on with Atlanta United FC, here are their recent acquisitions on Sunday. They were right at it right after MLS Cup, picking up a guy like Michael Parkhurst.
Yeah, I think often the fate of these expansion teams comes down to not just how the DPs perform, but how the experienced veterans who have experienced in MLS can help lead this team. And Parkhurst, of course, a guy who's played in MLS Cups, played abroad, and with the men's national team. I think he'll be an invaluable presence in the locker room as well.
Atlanta United's a team we could already actually put out sort of a mock lineup for the script. This is what it would look like. It's a mock-up.
Yeah, mock is the key word here. There's a lot to be done before March comes around. You're talking waiver draft, re-entry draft, super draft, free agency, all this stuff. But look, Kevin Kraut's a guy who spent time on loan with Philadelphia. Chris McCann has been on loan as well. A lot of guys in that position because this team got started quickly. But Harrison Heath is one to pay attention to. Also some young guys out of Atlanta. Some homegrown players immediately with U.S. national team experience down at the youth levels. Very exciting for ATL.
A couple months out, that's a nice front 3, though.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
For
more on what's going on with Atlanta United, Susanna Collins is with the team and files this report.
Thanks, Russell. I'm here in the impressive family offices of Arthur Blank. I just sat down with Darren Eales, and no surprise, he's not giving too much away in terms of specific players that they're going after today, but he did say he is really, really happy with the players that are available, calling it the deepest pool that it's been in years, which is a testament to the quality in MLS. He did stress that today they are going after value picks, i.e. going after the best players available while also paying attention to the team's needs. And right now for them, the biggest need is defense. Now, they did pick up Michael Parkhurst from the Crew. This is a guy that Tata Martino was super high on. They love his leadership. They love his MLS experience. They think that he's going to anchor that back line. So finding a partner for him in this draft is going to be a high priority. Russ, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Susanna, let's turn our attention to Minnesota United, a team that we don't really know a whole lot about. They have 3 guys on their roster.
Yeah, look, it's been a little bit of a source of consternation in Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's understandable. They went out and signed 2 outside backs from the NSL team, Justin Davis and Kevin Venegas, and then Joseph Greenspan, who's got some potential but's been with the Navy for a while. Look, the reason being the 2 lists are so different is because they didn't have a head coach. Adrian Heath only came in recently, and they were also finishing out a season with an ASL. Now, they've started slowly. I do think this week will be very, very big for Minnesota United FC. They'll have a glut of players roll in. You'll start to see that mock lineup come together for them, but it has been slow, and there's no doubt fans are looking for something this week.
Well, fans are really wondering what's going to happen with Christian Ramirez. I mean, this is the guy who's led this team in scoring in the NASL. Will he be playing in MLS?
I think so. It looks like all signs are pointing towards him being in Minnesota in uniform for them. And, you know, he's got a flair for the spectacular, a guy who can score goals in a multitude of ways. I think this is a guy that they can really build around. He's been their top scorer for the last 3 years. And you want to have a guy that the fans already know and love. I think they will do everything they can to keep him in the organization.
Absolutely. Look, you're also talking about a guy in Adrian Heath who's developed young strikers, Dom Dwyer, Kyle Laren. This is a guy who, while not down in that 20, 21-year range, has a lot of potential, had some Liga MX interest. He could be a big part of this expansion team.
Well, let's get you out to just outside Minneapolis, Minnesota. Julian Sakovits is with Minnesota United.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. In talking to Adrian Heath, he said that when him and general manager Manny Lagos received the list of unprotected players, there were certainly a few eyebrows raised and that they were pleasantly surprised by some of the names on that list. And from that list, they're definitely looking for 2 or 3 players that are ready to make an impact and help on the field right away. As for this Minnesota team, they're looking for players that are true to Minnesota form. That means tough, roll up your sleeves, and ready to get to work. As for players moving on from the NASL to MLS, everyone is talking Christian Ramirez. And here in Minnesota, we hear that there are discussions with Ramirez and that this team really hopes to have him a part of the 2017 roster. With Heath, he sees this as an opportunity similar to Orlando that he had with a player like Kyle Laren. So we know that he really likes Ramirez. We could see him a part of the team. He is currently off on his honeymoon after getting married over the weekend, so this could turn out to be quite the week for Ramirez. Russ, back to you.
All right, Julian, thanks so very much. Look, when the rosters came out, 11 players protected for each MLS team, all of a sudden you started thinking, ooh, there's a Robbie Keane out there and a Jermaine Jones.
Yeah.
But because of a lot of different machinations, we don't necessarily expect names like that to be selected in the expansion draft. Who are some of the bigger names maybe we will see taken?
I think Clint Irwin's one that we just watched in the MLS Cup that could be a good choice off the top. Jared Watts as well, but you're talking about big names. DeMarcus Beasley, though he's a free agent, these teams could have an opportunity to negotiate with him, give him whatever paycheck he wants. Jack Mack, also an Atlanta guy, but there is some value. There's a guy you know in Bobby Boswell, Calen.
Yeah, Bobby's a guy, when you talk about trying to build a team and guide them through a season, he'd be a great name to pick up. I also think Giles Barnes is a name, of course, maybe a little bit more towards the cap. But when you just look at talent and you have a guy who you can build around up front, he's a guy that can score goals. I could see a guy like Adrian Heath salivating to get a chance to work with someone like that.
Yeah, and here's a look at some of the guys that you picked out as far as attacking players are concerned. Who stands out to you on that list?
Well, I think this is where you have to do your homework. You know, these aren't the biggest names. You see a guy like Connor Hallisey who's played a lot for SKC, but I think the name that sticks out to me is Baja Husidic. He's a guy who's versatile. He can play multiple positions. He's able to chip in. He scored some nice goals. And more than anything, he's played for a winner. He's got championship experience playing with the Galaxy, playing under Bruce Arena. And he's a guy you can plug into the lineup right away. He'll be able to keep possession for you. I would imagine he would be on both teams' list.
As far as defensive players, Andrew, who stands out to you?
And look, this is where there's absolutely the most value, I think, in this draft for us. A lot of guys that have real potential here. Chris Duvall from Atlanta. You've got Javon Watson, very, very versatile. I'm looking at a Ken Tribbett because of his experience with the Union last year. He's young. He's affordable for them. He's a guy who could grow into the role. Certainly something I think Minnesota want. They want guys who maybe haven't reached their potential yet, who they can get value for. Ken Tribbett had some rough moments. You'll think back to the playoffs, but he started 20 games for a playoff team here, and he really grew throughout the season. I think he could be one who, as I said, roll up your sleeves, get dirty, a tough player, a guy who Minnesotans could identify with.
Look, nobody's really tipping their hands very much at this, but the draft is just about to start. They're going to have to start picking names off of the board. One more look at the draft rules as we start this thing up. Again, 5 picks each, Andrew.
5 picks. Atlanta United have the first pick. That's very important to remember. So Minnesota will be working off them. If they take a player from, say, as I said, Toronto FC, those players are off the board for Minnesota. So you have to be very, very strategic here. It will go quickly, though. 3 minutes between picks, but generally we do not see teams use all that time.
All right, so those are the rules for the MLS Expansion Draft, and it is almost time to send it down to Atlanta, Georgia. They're working there in the boardroom in Atlanta, also in Golden Valley, Minnesota, just outside of Minnesota. And it is time now for the 2016 MLS Expansion Draft. Atlanta United has the first selection, and that pick is in.
Atlanta United selects from Montreal Impact, Donny Toia.
Donny Toia off the board here. A versatile outside back for them, and we talked about value picks, guys, that you can kind of plug in on your roster. He'll be that. Can play left back and right back. Didn't get a lot of time in Montreal this season, but they came right in. Seems like they either went for a need, but they could flip Donny as well.
Well, American guy, too, so he won't count as an international spot, obviously, coming down from Canada. And I think this is a smart pick because he's a guy that's largely been forgotten about because he hasn't played. But the year prior, he had an excellent season.
Definitely.
People were talking about him potentially as a U.S. men's national team prospect. So I think they've done their homework to see, hey, this is a guy that's maybe a little bit undervalued now but can help our team right away.
Yeah, and it's one of those guys you were probably talking about at the top of the show when I asked you about what players were thinking about. He probably looked at a day like this as a day of possibility, no?
Absolutely. I mean, he's been up in Montreal doing well, but now he gets a chance to come down to Atlanta. Brand new franchise, sold out stadiums.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be an exciting opportunity for him because, look, there's nobody in those spots. We pulled them up right now. They're blank on our board.
All right, it is time to move things along to Minnesota United. They have their first pick in the expansion draft, and that pick is in.
Minnesota United selects from New York Red Bulls, Chris Duvall.
Chris Duvall is a player that on a lot of mock draft boards, his name showed up close to the top.
Yeah, and it's all about versatility so far, right? I said it. The talent is in the back line. That's where they're going here. This is a guy who had played center back a little bit this year for the Red Bulls. Not his primary position, but he'll be an outside back that they can lead on. Maybe not build around, but will provide competition at those spots after signing the two NASL guys. Duvall had an injury. He came back from it, but I think he's a guy that will fit all the boxes, check everything that they want from a defender. He's an ATL guy, though, isn't he? So this is a little bit of a maybe bittersweet for him, but he's got to be excited.
He is. He lives in my neighborhood, too, so
really?
This is a change for all of us.
Oh.
No, it's good for him, though, because he's got athleticism. He can get forward. I think Adrian Heath is going to like to send these outside backs forward. I think this is a nice piece for them.
Yeah, underrated for sure. I think Jesse Marsh and the Red Bulls really liked him. This is where it gets a little bit painful for these teams. You only have 11 players you can protect, and then, of course, the other ones that get automatic protection, they've got to be a little bit upset that Duvall's off the Red Bulls right now.
All right, it's time now for the first pick of the second round in the expansion draft. It goes to Atlanta United.
Atlanta United selects from FC Dallas, Zack Lloyd.
So Zack Lloyd, another selection. The defensive side of the ball is starting to get a lot of attention here.
There is a theme here, yes. And Zack Lloyd's a guy who helped anchor one of the best defenses in the league alongside of Matt Hedges, who was a best 11 selection this year for Dallas. But he had some injury issues. He had some concussion problems in 2016. I'm sure that they've figured that out. They don't think that's an issue. But Zack Lloyd, a veteran and less experience, can play with the ball to the back. And I think if you see Parkhurst and Lloyd together, both going to Atlanta, that's a sign of what Tata Martino wants to do.
I hated playing against Zack Lloyd. He was just always in the way. Good one-on-one defender, and then, of course, good on the ball as well. So I think for Atlanta, this is a nice pick for them. A guy, if they're looking to play out of the back with Parkhurst, this is a nice option on the right.
Versatile once again.
Yeah.
He can play outside back if you need him to, and that's what it comes down to.
All right, it's time for Minnesota United's second pick of the expansion draft.
Minnesota United selects from the Houston Dynamo, Calen Warner.
All right, Colin Warner, what do you think about the pick?
Look, it's not defense, but it's close to it. He's a box-to-box type, defensive type. They're going for a guy who I think is going to fit their values, as they said. A good passer, a guy who's bounced around a little bit. He won't have trouble adapting, but I do think that's a good pick from them. He's a guy who can come in and maybe not be a starting midfielder for you, although he did start a lot of games for a Houston team that wasn't great. He can definitely be a third-string guy, fourth-string guy, and push those starters and maybe even be one himself.
He was a bright spot for the Dynamo. Not a lot of positives down in South Texas this year, but he was consistent. I think when you're going into a new situation with an expansion team, coaches want to know what they're getting. And Colin Warner is one of those guys that he's a model of consistency, a guy they can count to keep the ball and keep things moving for them.
All right, time to move on to round number 3 of the expansion draft. It's time for the pick from Atlanta United.
Atlanta United selects from Toronto FC, Clint Irwin.
All right, so Toronto FC, the Eastern Conference champs, get one plucked from their roster.
Is this a surprise for you?
It's a little bit of a surprise, but this one maybe smells to me like an asset pick. If Guzan is indeed the starter down there, Clint Irwin could be a good backup for them. Maybe Guzan's gone on international duty from time to time. Of course, you're thinking about Gold Cup and everything else. But this could be one that you see them flip. This could be one they say, hey, Clint Irwin's available. Come offer us something.
There's some value in this.
You've got to include that in your thought process, and that may be where they're going with this one.
Yeah, and if things don't work out in these dealings, you never quite know in these, especially when a player's coming back potentially from abroad. So to have a safety valve like that,
it could
and
break
MLS
down.
starting
It could break
goalkeeper,
down,
huge asset.
Yeah, okay. With Clint Irwin, I mean, what an interesting career trajectory to begin with. This is just sort of another step.
Just days after MLS Cup. That's a roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing tougher for a guy like Clint Irwin would be a guy in Seattle right now who's enjoying the parade.
Yeah, still on the board, right? They're walking through downtown Seattle, walking toward the Space Needle. We'll see what happens with that. But look, I think Clint Irwin, he's a professional. He's been through this before. He understands the business. He won't be too surprised because when you looked at that list, his name popped out. You said, yes, he's a guy who has a value, but is just a good player. So,
all right, so now as we continue the third round of the expansion draft, Minnesota United is in with the pick.
Minnesota United selects from the Columbus Crew, Mohamed Said.
So it's Mohamed Said from the Columbus Crew, selected by Minnesota United.
I like this pick. I think Mohamed Said's a guy that really was great in possession with them for this team, and stepped up throughout the course of the season. I think when you look at him and Colin Warner, those are two nice pieces, essentially, to be able to build your team.
And by the way, the streak continues. Columbus Crew, the only MLS franchise to have a player selected from every expansion draft in league history, starting in 1997.
Yeah, at number 8, number 6, he can play both positions. Versatility continues to be a theme in this expansion draft. I do think Mohamed Said was a good one. And you're right, in possession there, I think Adrian Heath probably saw him from afar in the Eastern Conference, said, that's a guy I can pick up. His salary, not too bad, so that won't kill their cap either.
All right, here's a look at the draft rooms in Atlanta and also outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I see Calen Carr's face there in Minnesota. We're streamed into these draft rooms.
I like it, yeah.
What's up, guys?
Well, it's time to move on to round 4 of the expansion draft. Atlanta United has their pick in.
Go ahead, Atlanta. You're ready.
Atlanta United selects from Orlando City, Mikey Ambrose.
Okay, so Orlando City has their pick off the board.
Mikey Ambrose.
Yeah,
Some history here.
Young outside back who's played a little bit in USL before he came in, didn't go through the super draft. Once again, you're looking at the defensive side of the ball. You're looking at young players, guys I think that they think have a little bit more to their game that we haven't seen yet. You're betting on the future, right? It's not about the past here with a lot of these picks. It's what can they do in the next 2 or 3 years. Once again, a value pick. We've mentioned that over and over and over. Defense, value, a theme.
Yeah, and they know him. I'm sure they've done their research to understand that, this is what the expansion draft is about, is finding guys that maybe don't jump out on the page for you, but you feel can contribute in need when called upon. And this is a name that I think that they'll find will do that.
Yeah, and look, Atlanta's a team that's spending money on their attacking players.
Right.
So maybe this is how they're building up the back end. And if they can anchor it with a guy like either Clint Irwin or maybe a Brad Guzan, that's the way they want to build their team. All right, 4th round continues. Minnesota United has their pick in. Goalkeeper from Real Salt Lake selected from Minnesota United.
I think this is a guy that a lot of folks thought had starting potential, but has been behind Nick Rimando and just wasn't going to get that opportunity. And Calen, that goes back to what you were talking about. Folks watching this, players at home saying, I'm ready for my shot. And it looks like Jeff Attinella has a good chance of getting his now.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're sitting there and you're stuck behind a guy like Nick Rimando, you're doing a lot of watching.
Throw your hands up, right?
And there's been great players throughout the history of the league that have been stuck behind number ones. I played with Tally Hall when he was stuck behind
Pat Onstad. Yeah.
So this is not unusual. Same with David Bingham was behind John Bush. So this, especially with the goalkeepers, guys like this, you will see emerge.
Right, Antonella's a guy I think universally that people think is ready for a starting role somewhere, just not in front of a guy like Nick Rimando.
No, and that's the unfortunate part for Jeff. But this has got to be exciting for him. He's
Sure.
a guy who's shown in not in extended periods, but he's shown in cup competitions and also in those breaks when Nick Rimando's been gone with the U.S. national team that he's got the chops, he's got the ability to do this. Talk about hunger, he's got to have it right now. He's got to be thinking, I'm going to go win a #1 job and show these people what I can do.
Yeah, and Salt Lake must have been in an awkward position when they had to pick their 11 too, because Jeff Antonello was not a guy that they would want to leave out there.
Absolutely not.
Unprotected, but you're not going to leave Nick Rimando unprotected either. Okay, it's time for the 5th and final round of the expansion draft. Atlanta United has their pick in.
Atlanta United selects from Sporting KC, Alec Carr.
Carr from Sporting Alec
Khan, yes.
Alec Khan, the goalkeeper.
Yeah, who just signed a new deal with Sporting Kansas City, so it's a little bit surprising in that sense. You're looking, once again, at maybe an asset thing, maybe a value thing. Maybe they're looking to trade him back, get something else, a protected player from Sporting Kansas City. That's all guesswork right now. That's kind of where we're in because they can't make trades during the expansion draft. But a guy who showed his ability this year as well. You're looking at another goalkeeper. Maybe they see him as the backup.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's multiple goalkeepers
Fans
going off the
in
board
Philadelphia
here.
are saying, I've seen this before. Multiple goalkeepers.
Yeah, a lot of goalkeepers going here.
Yeah.
It's defense first, huh?
Yeah, look, building up assets. When Atlanta United had their conference call yesterday with media, they mentioned that, look, some of these guys we pick up, we might end up trading. That's just the way it is. And now you look at the way they've gone about this. Defense, goalkeepers, multiple goalkeepers. There's going to be some moves on top of moves here.
Yeah, I think likely. I mean, you don't come into the expansion draft being like, how many goalkeepers can we get in this?
Right.
And they've also
out the depth chart,
they've also just had Sean Johnson briefly before they moved him on to NYCFC, and then been rumored, of course, with Brad Guzan. So something is in the works here. I don't exactly know
Some
what.
bumper business in goalkeepers in Atlanta right now. Yeah.
All right, look, it is time for the final pick of the 2016 MLS expansion draft. It goes to Minnesota United.
Minnesota United selects from the New England Revolution, Femi Hollinger-Jansen.
All right, so the New England Revolution lose one of their players in the final pick of the expansion
A
draft.
draft pick who showed a lot this year when he hit the field, was dynamic, made things happen, somebody that people didn't really know. I look at this pick from Minnesota United, and I really like the pick. There's a lot of upside there. We haven't seen a full season of Femi. This could be good. It could be a young Calen Carr.
That dude is a beast. I did not have any of the aerial game that he
I
had.
thought you were talking about a young Calen Carr.
Oh, yeah.
Also a beast. Also a beast.
Yeah, if I start referring to myself in the third person, please help. But no, I think I saw this name earlier, and I was like, I wonder. And then I looked up his stats, and he didn't have a lot of minutes.
Right.
But in those minutes that he did have, he showed incredible promise. And you also have to look the team he was playing on: Kai Kamara, Teal Bunbury, some big name, bigger striker guys. So I think this is one of those where you're like, let's give this guy a little bit more time and see what he can do.
Yeah, I think you look at this list, and most of these guys, to me, scream, we want them for Minnesota United. These are guys that we want to have on our roster. Maybe a Mohamed Saeed might be one, although he has that international pick. A Jeff Antonello, maybe Real Salt Lake is going to give you a call to try to pull him back in. But I'm with you. To me, they got him at 5, Femi Hollinger-Jansen. He wasn't on our list of attacking players, but I think that's a good pick in this situation, a guy that you can bring in on a low cap number and have a great opportunity.
How about a guy like Teal Bunbury to Minnesota? A guy from the area, maybe make a move and figure out a way to get him onto Minnesota United?
There's other mechanisms, right? And maybe New England's sitting back there saying, hey, we really like Femi. We really don't want to give up Femi, so maybe you get Teal Bunbury on the other side and a little bit of extra. These are all the different movements you got to think about. All these guys are in these rooms scheming, getting calls, trying to make moves, because that's the basis of building these rosters.
Yeah, we just took a look at Minnesota's 5 picks from the expansion draft. Here's a look at Atlanta United's 5 picks. Safe to say, or fair to say, that Minnesota looked to be picking guys that maybe they can slot right in, whereas Atlanta looks to, this is a step-by-step process. Maybe this is one of the steps along the way.
I could see these guys being starters. When I look at Donnie Toya and Zack Lloyd, to me, those Clint Irwin, I think a lot of these guys could be starters.
Fair enough.
I also think on the other side as well, but I really like the fact that they've able to get these 2 outside backs, because I think when you look at the way this team is set up already, they've got the strike force already. And I think you were right, Andrew, before the draft, that the strength of this draft came in the back and in the center of midfield, and you see both teams accessing that.
Yeah, they certainly went that route. I do think Donnie Toya and Zack Lloyd were great picks from them, and I'm starting to wonder how Atlanta United are going to try to play. What are they going to try to do out of the back? Because all these guys they're picking up are guys who can play with the ball at their feet. I am wondering what they're doing in the background, though, because we've already seen with Sean John that they're willing to play the game, that they're willing to make moves that benefit their team, even if they don't seem all that straightforward. And when you've got an Alec Khan, a Clint Irwin here, and rumors of Brad Guzan headed your way, it starts to get a little bit murky and a little bit complicated. So both these teams ones to keep an eye on in the coming weeks.
And you wonder who else they've been talking to about what deals are coming next.
Yeah, there's a transfer window coming, right? And there's a reentry draft, stage 1 and 2. There's a waiver draft. There's so many other places where moves can be made and trades will open up. These teams will change. Let's not take these lists and just plug them in right now. They'll change, but there's some great pieces they picked up.
You don't want to plug these into the mock lineups?
No, are we gonna go mock? I'm ready. I can go mock.
I don't know. We'll see if they can get the graphics ready in time. But look, Atlanta United and Minnesota United have picked 5 players each, 10 players in Major League side, 10 teams in MLS. Half the league right now has lost a player off their roster. And then with these guys who were just selected, it's time to move on.
It is. Now, they did lose a player, these 10 teams.
Yeah.
But they did get compensated with a little bit of allocation money to make it a little bit less painful. So it's not a, it's not a zero-sum game, but they did get something out of it, and that's something important to remember if you're a fan of those teams.
It's not a zero-sum game, but is there a way to determine which team has done better, or will we not know that, until years down the line?
It's hard to say, but I do say when you look at Minnesota, what they told us going into the draft as far as the personality of the team that they want, I think they've stayed true to that. You look at a guy like Femi Hollinger-Jensen, Chris Duvall, Colin Warner, Saeed, Anitella. These are blue-collar guys.
They are. They'll fit in, no doubt, there, and they'll be guys who won't take up so much cap space that they can't go out and do some work. Now, remember, we saw Manny Lagos, we saw Adrian Heath, pictures they sent out in Argentina just last week. So this is not the end-all, be-all for them. There will be more signings coming through, and I think you'll also see them look to do a little bit of the same thing Atlanta did, which was go in those attacking spots and find maybe the Argentine playmaker you're looking for. Someone like that. Adrian Heath, he knows how to build attacking teams.
Let's hear from Adrian Heath, because Adrian Heath is right there with Julian Sakovits right outside Minneapolis.
But I think it's one of them that they'll be really pleased, because I don't think they didn't pick anybody that we were after, so probably it was vice versa. So.
Adrian, Minnesota United wraps up now the expansion draft. You add a few more players to this roster. Are you pleased with what you're able to take?
Yes, we are. There's probably one surprise that sort of threw us a little bit through the draft, but on the whole, I think that we've got 5 pieces that if all 5 were to stay, we'll be really comfortable. 1 or 2 players have shown a bit of interest to other clubs as well, so we'll have to sit down and see what we decide to do. But if we keep all 5, we'll be delighted with what we've got. We think they can all contribute.
You mentioned being surprised. What kind of took you back from what you saw Atlanta do there?
Well, I think you try and preempt what everybody's going to do, and I think one of theirs took me a little bit by surprise. I'd rather not say who, but I think it's one of them that they'll be really pleased, because I don't think they didn't pick anybody that we were after, so probably it was vice versa. So nothing's happened where you've gone, oh my God, that we weren't expecting that and we didn't know which way to go. So we were really pleased with what we've got today. Obviously from now it's the serious stuff starts. We've got to start filling this roster out properly.
And now as you look to filling the rest of this roster out, what can we expect from Minnesota?
Well, we need to be busy. Obviously, we've got a lot of pieces to fit in a short period of time, but we're well down the way on more than 3 or 4 deals. So hopefully in the next few days you'll be seeing 1 or 2 more players arriving at Minnesota.
And finally, Adrian, this Minnesota team, every team takes on their own identity. What are you guys looking for the identity to be here in Minnesota?
We want to be competitive from day one. If we can get the players that we've identified, I think we might surprise 1 or 2 people. I know 1 or 2 people have said 1 or 2 interesting things about the way we've gone about things, but that'll spur us on, and we're looking forward to putting this group together, because we've got a lot of faith in what we're trying to do.
Adrian, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Minnesota United entering Major League Soccer with a sizable chip on their collective
Did you say one of those things? Did I say one of those things?
Are you one of those people who said one of those things?
I don't know. Look, the pace has been a little bit slow, but there were reasons for that, and it sounds like things are coming down the pipeline. I did think it was interesting the way he said, hey, if we keep all these 5 players, we'll be okay with that, which is kind of the feeling that we got after we watched this. That roster starting to grow, that mock lineup that we saw that was, well, we didn't see it because there weren't enough players. it's starting to be built out, but they have some foundations there in the middle and the back.
They do, and they also have the Super Draft coming up, which they have the #1 selection for as well. People have been talking about the Duke striker as a potential.
Ebosise, yeah, he'd be a young striker that Heath could work with.
Yeah,
sure.
and he's been so good with them in the past. So, yeah, I like that. He's also left the door open, though, because he said, if we keep all five, right? That's like, you know, if you need to make a phone call.
Hey, call us. We'll pick up. We'll pick up.
Yeah, what do you think he learned, though, from the experience of having gone through that with Orlando and now doing it again that he brings to Minnesota?
I think when you look at Orlando's, it wasn't maybe the impactful draft that they had hoped for. I also think Orlando's identity changed over time. And I think there were a lot of people pulling within that franchise as to which way it should go, and ownership was part of that. But I think now Adrian Heath has been brought in, his expertise has been brought in. Manny Lagos knows exactly what he wants out of this roster as well, and they're starting to build that way. And this is blue collar right now. That's the way it looks. But you're also looking at those attacking positions saying, those are going to be filled in with quality, and Adrian Heath knows quality. He's been in Argentina recently. They've been on scouting trips. They'll be looking, I'm sure, in the trade market, Super Draft, also discovery signings. There's a lot more work to do, but it's going to get done. They're going to have to pick up the pace.
Absolutely. And you look at this board right now, and I wouldn't expect it to look like this come opening day for either team, to be honest. And I think, you know, they've got some nice pieces here, some guys with MLS experience, but they're going to have to color it in with the Super Draft, with signings, a guy like Christian Ramirez and others that they bring in from abroad.
Yeah, and a little bit of a different tack there from Atlanta United. Now, we started out and we showed you the Atlanta mock, and maybe we can throw up what's going on with Atlanta United right now. They have 5 picks in this draft, and they're just starting to fill in. Now, they're only missing a central attacking midfielder.
Yeah, they basically have their whole bench set up as this shows right now, but I think you look at the two sides of this.
They got 3 keepers.
It's pretty young in parts. You're looking at the Andrew Carlton, the Goslins of the world, even the Heaths, the Ottos, those sort of guys, Vasquez, but they do have experience in the Kenwyn Jones, Parkhurst, perhaps Guzan, if that happens. So they're really building with that top-level player having experience, some young players with real potential below them in the Villalbas and the Almirones, and then a young core to maybe learn from those guys.
You know, I just finished saying that this probably won't look like what it trots out on opening day, but take a look. Before the day, we said this front three is not a bad place to start. That's not a bad back four to play with either. I mean, you Parkhurst and Lloyd in the middle, Toya, Ambrose. I think that's a decent place to go.
Maybe a little bit susceptible in the air, perhaps, but like I said, you're seeing a theme there. They want players, they want defenders who can play out of the back. And I think that's probably an indication of the sort of style we'll see from Tata Martino.
We've already heard from Minnesota. Let's hear from Atlanta. Darren Eales, president of Atlanta United FC, with Susanna Collins.
All right, Darren, so much planning goes into an event like this, but from an execution standpoint today, how smoothly did everything go for you guys?
Yeah, I think it went very smooth. I think, we're happy with the selections that we made. I think Minnesota made a great bunch of selections as well. I think both clubs felt that this was a draft where there was a lot of talent on the board, and I think it says a lot for Major League Soccer that the talent pool seems to be getting deeper year on year.
You spoke earlier about the importance of value picks, picking the best player available. You've got 3 defenders, 2 goalkeepers that you selected today. Would you say that was sort of a fairly even balance between value picks and addressing team needs?
Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be a couple of prearranged trades that we did that will get announced later today. So we feel the balance we've got here is picks that's going to give us help for the future and give us flexibility in those final roster spots, as well as some key components for us that obviously for Tata as he builds his team.
Well, defense was one of the needs that you guys wanted to address today. Donny Toya, you select first. Is this a guy that you see fitting into the style of play that Tata is looking to establish here?
Yeah, I think if you look at all the players that we selected, they're all ones that Tata feels comfortable with in terms of his style of play. So, very much as we were picking the players, that's what we did. So, we feel pretty good about the players that we got.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Thanks.
Best of luck moving forward. Russ, back to you.
All right, Susanna, thank you very much. And that'll about do it for the 2016 MLS Expansion Draft. For Calen Carr and Andrew Wiebe, I'm Russ Thaler. Got the re-entry draft coming up, free agency. We'll see you all together again in LA in January at the MLS Super Draft. Stick with MLSsoccer.com for all of your coverage throughout the offseason. There's a lot coming up. Thanks so much for watching with us today, and we'll see y'all soon.